So you've now learned what parts are found inside of a cell. There are up to 13 organelles that you need to know the names of and the jobs of. But it turns out that not every cell is exactly the same. You've got skin cells and nerve cells and red blood cells and liver cells. You've got all sorts of different types of cells inside of your body. But you came from a single cell. Remember, this was you. You started as a single cell. Sperm plus egg equals the very first cell. We're going to call this a zygote later in the year. And so you started as just one cell. And that cell started to replicate or copy itself. And it made copies and copies and copies. But if you notice, you're not just a big bunch of cells. You're made of all sorts of different types of cells. So we're going to learn today about something called cell specialization or cell differentiation. It means the same thing. Specialization, differentiation means that these cells take on different jobs. Well, how do they know what job to take on? And what lets a nerve cell send messages through the body versus a blood cell carry oxygen? So we're going to look today at that. A multicellular organism begins its life as an embryo. And those are many cells that have the same DNA and no job other than to grow. So it was like this first picture here. Just keep growing and growing and growing. So you started as one and you grew into about 100 cells. But then those cells began to differentiate or become specialized. Specialized cells means their structure fits their function. If the cell has to do a certain job, like become a brain cell, then it needs to be able to have certain structures inside of it. So cell specialization means that each of the different cells has different parts inside of it. Now, what we have to be careful about is that the cells of multicellular organisms, humans are multicellular, plants are multicellular, even mushrooms or fungi are multicellular. If you're in the same organism, like this little baby, then all of that baby cells have the same exact DNA, but some of the genes are turned on and some of the genes are turned off. It's kind of like if you were given a cookbook, but you only worked in a restaurant that served breakfast. You'd only be using the recipes that are in the breakfast section. So your DNA gives you all the recipes that you might need. But if you are a brain cell, you're only going to be using the genes to help with the brain function. So all your cells have the same DNA, but some genes are turned on and some genes are turned off. And that is what allows the cells to become specialized. Adult organisms still have small reserves of stem cells. Stem cells are what we call undifferentiated. They haven't taken on a job yet. And so here are your stem cells, and they can become any other type of cell. They could become a nerve cell, a heart cell, a blood cell, a liver cell. So you as an adult even have a very small number of stem cells in your body. But most of your cells are differentiated. For example, red blood cells are specialized with the protein hemoglobin to help transport oxygen. Muscle cells have lots of mitochondria. Every time your muscle contracts, it takes energy. And so where does all of that energy come from? The mitochondria. Remember, the mitochondria is performing this big R trait. Not regulation, not reproduction, but the other Sternger R trait. And that's because it needs energy, but it all happens in the mitochondria. So if I look at a blood cell and a muscle cell, like your heart muscle cell, they're going to be very different inside. Sperm cells have what's called a flagella to help them swim towards the egg. It's a little protein that can kind of move back and forth. No other of the cells in the human body have that flagella. some plants have what are called xylem cells. So what we want to notice here is, yes, human cells are differentiated, but so are things like plant cells. They have certain tubes that help carry water. We don't have those tubes because we're not plant cells. What made us different like that? Our DNA. Our cells have certain DNA, plant cells have certain DNA. And then finally we have nerve cells. And these are one of the best examples. See this unique shape? It almost doesn't even look like a cell. It's so specialized. And so the hard thing about these specialized cells is they can't just go back and become a blood cell. They are kind of stuck in this job. And this is why research is really trying to look at how can we possibly use stem cells if someone has a nerve injury. For example, if somebody got paralyzed, how could we rebuild new nerve cells? And so you're going to watch a video all about stem cells. The last section of your notes is actually about how cells communicate. Cells are going to communicate to each other to help the organism maintain what we call homeostasis. Remember, homeostasis means to control the internal environment. And so cells need to be able to control their reaction. Some cells are going to communicate over a short distance. They'll use either chemical or electrical signals. For example, nerve cells actually use electricity. This is why they shock somebody's heart, because they need to shock the nerves into telling the muscle to contract. So nerve cells use electricity and chemicals to control body responses. Notice this word control, that's one of our R words too. So if the cells are really close to each other, they can either use electricity or chemicals. But sometimes cells that are very far away need to communicate. And these require long-lasting chemicals like hormones. The hormone insulin is a really important hormone. It's going to help control the sugar in your blood, because if there's too much sugar, it can actually cause brain damage. So insulin is actually going to be made in an area of the body called the pancreas. So when you eat sugar and it gets absorbed into your blood, the pancreas will notice if there's a lot of sugar. The pancreas will make a long-lasting hormone like insulin. And this hormone will travel all throughout the body. It will affect the liver. It will affect your blood vessels. It will affect your arteries. It's going to have lots of effects through the body. So what we need to understand is that organisms are made of all these different cells. Cells that have become differentiated to do different jobs. But these cells still work together to communicate. It's now time, you've reached the very end of your notes. This is actually the end of section 2.1. You need to do your summary box. 2 vocab words, 1 picture. You'll notice there are 3 pictures here on this page. So make sure that you complete your summary box and make sure that you've started working on your apps.